Watch as European politicians refuse to observe a minute's silence for Charlie Kirk. Swedish MEP Charlie Weimers had dedicated the rest of his allotted speaking time to a silence in memory of the Turning Point's founder.
Madam President, dear colleagues, the murder of political activist Charlie Kirk, a husband, loving father and patriot, has shocked the world. We must strongly condemn political violence and rhetoric that incites violence. Please stand with me in reflection and prayer in his honor, and I yield the rest of my time for a moment of silence.
But parliamentarians had other ideas. MEPs were outraged.
Sehr geehrte Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
MEPs were pointing out the Parliament had observed a silence in memory of George Floyd after he was killed in 2020.
On behalf of Parliament and personally, I would like to express my deepest condolences to George Floyd's family and friends. His death on May 25th has led to protests in the United States, in Europe and around the world. These protests show everyone that the respect to democratic values and human rights is fundamental and a challenging task we must work at every day. We shall only rest when Martin Luther King's dream becomes a reality and people will not be judged by the colour of their skin but by the substance of their character. This Parliament has always strongly condemned any form of violence and discrimination and is committed to the respect of the rule of law. I want to invite you to observe a minute's silence in memory of George Floyd and all of the victims of violence, racism and discrimination.
The scenes echo the rancor scene in the US Congress on Wednesday night, where some Democrats were accused of refusing to pray for Charlie Kirk.
The chair would ask that all members present in the chamber and those in the gallery please rise for a moment of prayer for Charlie Kirk and his family. Let's wait a minute. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Shh. The House will be in order. Shh. The House will be in order. We will join prayer right after this, okay?
In the wake of Mr. Kirk's murder, Donald Trump had called for a calming in political rhetoric.
It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
The UK branch of Kirk's organisation Turning Point, however, said there were already attempts to stir up intimidation of their team. They also called out Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, who previously likened Turning Point to a, quote, sinister force taking hold of our country. They said this kind of language can inflame tensions further. Charlie Kirk's Turning Point is a student-based movement seeking to harness the voice of conservative youth not just in America but around the world. There are branches at universities across the US, many of which held vigils for their founder overnight.
USA! 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 Fight on, everybody!
The amount of love people poured just for Charlie Kirk. When I heard about Charlie Kirk getting shot, the amount of people that were in disarray, the amount of people that were like calling their friends, calling their parents. I would walk by, everyone's talking about Charlie Kirk and hoping that he was okay. The amount of love and support they showed for Charlie Kirk was just unbelievable.
All right, new this evening, we know a lot of you guys have been keeping up with the death of Charlie Kirk all day today, from this afternoon to this evening. Well, happening right now in front of the Biz, the Memorial Library, a vigil happening for Charlie Kirk. This vigil is being organized by Turning Point USA, the OU chapter. The organization's Turning Point was founded by Charlie Kirk.
Supporters stood in remembrance outside the Turning Point headquarters in Arizona, near Charlie Kirk's hometown. His church held its own prayer service for their grieving congregation, and flowers were laid outside the very starting place of Turning Point in Chicago.
That God draws close to, that is not fundamentally transformed for the better. Can a city be saved in a day? Can the destiny of a nation be rearranged in one finite moment? I would dare to say, yes, it can.
In Seattle, supporters gathered at Westlake Park to mourn the activist. Charlie Kirk's coffin was flown with Vice President J.D. Vance to Arizona yesterday. Donald Trump has posthumously awarded him a Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Let me express the horror and grief so many Americans at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk have felt. Charlie was a giant of his generation, a champion of liberty, and an inspiration to millions and millions of people. Our prayers are with his wonderful wife, Eric, and his beautiful children. Fantastic people they are. We miss him greatly, yet I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on. I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The date of the ceremony will be announced, and I can only guarantee you one thing, that we will have a very big crowd. Very, very big.
A passionate advocate for free speech, Mr. Kirk believed in the power of debate to settle differences. There's now call for calm across the political spectrum for a coming together in the wake of such a tragedy.
I think Americans they're really still quite in shock by what has happened, because he is such a big figure. He has such a reputation, and regardless of what people think of his politics, he was someone who without fail was civil in his discourse, was rational in his argumentation, and was incredibly courteous in his demeanor. And I think a lot of Americans, for them, it is the MLK, the Martin Luther King, or the JFK assassination of their generation. This is something that will have an indelible mark on generations of Americans.
On that point, that is a really significant issue, because at the time that MLK was shot, he wasn't the only person. RFK was shot at that point in time as well, and this was only a few years after JFK was shot. These things don't seem to happen in isolation. When one happens, you see copycats, you see a sort of a mood arise, and some commentators have been worrying that America is entering its years of lead.
And I think that concern is genuine. You're quite right. There was a horrendous cycle of political violence that started in the 60s and went through the 1970s, and perhaps culminated in the early 1980s with the attempted assassination of then President Ronald Reagan. I also think that there is a sincere and widespread grief about what America might have lost, because many people on the center right feel that Charlie Kirk had such a gift at communication and at relating to people that he would have been a very powerful future candidate for president. And so whilst he accomplished a huge amount in 31 years of his life, a great many Americans feel that he had much more left to contribute, and they would have had even more profound impact on the history of America. So this political assassination it has so much significance.
Nick Dunning, GB News.